Roman Empire, Episode 4, The Birth of the Republic. Learn While Sleeping History series. Opening, a city without a king. In the quiet memory of ancient Rome, there is a moment when the city seems to hold its breath. The old kings are gone, the palace no longer speaks with one voice, and the people of Rome stand before a question that will shape centuries of history. How can a city be ruled if it refuses to be ruled by a king? This episode begins where the age of kings ends. In the previous chapter, we walked through the legendary monarchy of Rome, from Romulus to the later rulers influenced by Etruscan power. We saw a city slowly learning how to organize itself, how to worship its gods, how to build public spaces, how to fight, how to command, and how to imagine itself as something more than a village on the Tiber. But by the end of the monarchy, Roman memory no longer speaks of order and foundation. It speaks of arrogance, violence, fear, and a royal house that had become unbearable. The last king was remembered as Lucius Tarquinius Superbus, Tarquin the Proud. His very name, Superbus, carries the feeling of pride, harshness, and dangerous ambition. Roman tradition presents him not as a father of the city, but as a tyrant. He ruled without proper respect for the Senate. He used force where earlier kings had used ritual and consent. He surrounded himself with power, and in Roman memory, he crossed the invisible line between kingship and domination. Whether every detail of the story is historical cannot be known with certainty. The earliest centuries of Rome are wrapped in legend, family memory, later political interpretation, and moral storytelling. But this is precisely why the story matters. The Romans did not simply record the fall of the monarchy, they shaped it into a lesson. They taught themselves that kings could become tyrants, that one man's unchecked power could threaten the liberty of the whole community, and that political freedom required memory, discipline, and suspicion. The birth of the Republic was not only a change of government, it was a change in Roman psychology. From this point forward, the word king would become dangerous in Roman public life. To be accused of wanting to be king was not a small insult. It was a political death sentence. Centuries later, even powerful generals and ambitious statesmen would have to move carefully around this fear. The Republic began with a rejection, and that rejection became one of Rome's deepest instincts. So tonight, we follow Rome through one of the most important transitions in ancient history, from monarchy to republic, from royal command to shared magistracies, from the rule of one man to a system built on rivalry, limits, and public duty. The empire is still far away. Julius Caesar is still centuries in the future. Augustus has not yet been born. But the foundations of their world begin here, in the early Republic, when Rome first tried to solve the problem of power. Part 2. Tarquin the Proud and the Crisis of Royal Power. To understand the Roman Republic, we must first understand what the Romans believed they had escaped. Tarquin the Proud stands at the edge of Roman legend like a warning carved into stone. He was not remembered as merely a strict ruler. He was remembered as a king who broke the moral balance between ruler and city. Earlier Roman kings, even when legendary, were often connected with gifts to the community. Romulus gave Rome its beginning, Numa gave it religious order, Tullus Hostilius gave it military force, Ancus Marcius gave it expansion and public works. The Tarquins, especially under Etruscan influence, were connected with architecture, drainage, temples, and royal ceremony. But Tarquin the Proud becomes something different. He is the ruler who takes without listening. He is the king who treats the city not as a public community, but as private property. Roman tradition says that Tarquin came to power through violence and ruled without the proper approval of the Senate. This detail is important because the Senate already existed as a council of aristocratic elders. Under the kings, it did not rule Rome as it later would, but it represented continuity, advice, family authority, and the memory of the leading clans. When Tarquin ignored or humiliated the Senate, he was not only insulting individuals, he was disturbing the relationship between power and legitimacy. A monarchy can survive harshness if people still believe it has order. But when royal power becomes personal, when the ruler's household becomes feared, and when public honor is violated, the system begins to crack. In Roman memory, the final break came through the tragedy of Lucretia. Lucretia was remembered as a noblewoman of exceptional virtue, the wife of Lucius Tarquinius Collatinus. The king's son, Sextus Tarquinius, violated her. In the Roman story, this was not only a private crime, it became a public wound. Lucretia summoned her family, told them what had happened, and then took her own life. Her death became a symbol of dishonor forced upon the innocent, and of a royal family that had placed itself above law, morality, and restraint. Standing over this tragedy, according to Roman tradition, was Lucius Junius Brutus. His name, Brutus, would echo across Roman history. He took an oath to drive out the Tarquins and never again allow a king to rule Rome. The story is dramatic, perhaps shaped by later generations, but its political message is clear. The Republic was born not from calm administrative reform, but from moral outrage. The Romans told this story because they wanted their political system to have a sacred emotional origin. The Republic was not presented as a clever invention. It was presented as a necessary defense of liberty. Tarquin became the image of tyranny. Lucretia became the image of violated honor. Brutus became the image of civic duty stronger than fear. In this way, Rome's first republican lesson was simple and severe. Power must never again be concentrated in one household, one bloodline, or one man. Part 3. The expulsion of the kings. The fall of Tarquin did not mean that Rome instantly became peaceful. Revolutions rarely end when the ruler leaves. They leave behind uncertainty, danger, and the question of what comes next. Tarquin and his family were expelled, but their supporters did not disappear from the world. Royal power still had friends. Nearby cities still watched Rome carefully. Etruscan influence had not vanished. The young republic was fragile. The traditional date for this transformation is 509 BCE. This date became one of the great anchors of Roman historical memory. Later Romans would look back to it as the beginning of their political liberty, just as they looked back to the founding of the city as the beginning of their sacred identity. The fall of the kings and the founding of the Republic formed a second birth of Rome. But we should imagine this moment carefully. Rome was not yet a Mediterranean empire. It was a growing city-state in central Italy, surrounded by rivals, allies, enemies, and older cultures. Its political experiment was not guaranteed to succeed. A city that removes its king must still collect taxes, command armies, settle disputes, maintain religious rituals, and negotiate with powerful families. Without structure, freedom becomes chaos. Without authority, liberty can collapse into civil conflict. The Romans answered this problem by preserving much of the power of kingship, but dividing it. They did not destroy command, they controlled it. They did not abandon authority. They placed it inside offices, time limits, and public expectations. This is one of the most important ideas in early Roman politics. The Republic did not mean that everyone was equal. It did not mean modern democracy. It did not mean that all citizens had the same voice, or that the poor could easily challenge the rich. The early Republic was deeply aristocratic. Leading families dominated offices, religion, land, and military command. Yet it was still a radical change from monarchy, because no single man could legally hold permanent royal power. Rome replaced the king with magistrates, especially 2 annually elected consuls. Instead of one ruler, there were 2. Instead of lifetime rule, there was a limited term. Instead of hereditary royal power, there was office. The symbols of command remained, but the structure changed. This balance between continuity and change gave the Republic strength. Romans did not throw away the political habits of the past. They redesigned them. The power to lead armies, judge serious matters, and act on behalf of the state continued. But now it was supposed to belong to the Republic, not to a king. The expulsion of the kings also created a lasting political myth. Every generation of Romans would be taught that monarchy had ended because pride and abuse had corrupted it. The Republic would therefore define itself by opposition. A good Roman citizen defended liberty. A dangerous Roman sought kingship. This fear would guide politics for nearly 500 years, and it would return with enormous force during the age of Julius Caesar. Part 4. The consuls. 2 men instead of 1 king. At the heart of the new republic stood the consulship. The consuls were the highest ordinary magistrates of Rome. They inherited many of the powers once associated with kings, especially military command and executive authority. But the genius of the office was limitation. There were 2 consuls at the same time. Each could check the other. Each held office for only 1 year. Each was expected to return to private life after serving. In theory, no consul could become a permanent monarch because his colleague, the Senate, the people, tradition, and time itself stood against him. The Romans understood something profound about power. They did not trust virtue alone. A political system cannot depend only on rulers being good people. It must be designed for ambition, pride, rivalry, and fear. The consulship accepted that powerful men would seek honor. Instead of pretending ambition did not exist, Rome gave ambition a path, but surrounded that path with limits. The Latin word often connected with high Roman authority is imperium. It referred to the power to command, especially in military and legal contexts. Under the kings, imperium was concentrated in one ruler. Under the Republic, it was held by magistrates, especially consuls and later praetors, but only under specific rules. This became one of Rome's great political habits. Power was real, but it had a name, a boundary, a ritual, and a term. The consuls also show us how aristocratic the early republic remained. In practice, the leading offices were controlled by patrician families, the old elite clans who claimed special ancestry and social authority. The republic did not begin as a democracy of ordinary citizens. It began as an aristocratic republic, ruled by elite competition rather than royal inheritance. Yet this elite competition mattered. Under monarchy, one family could dominate the entire state. Under the Republic, several noble families competed for honor, office, military glory, and public recognition. This competition could be harsh and exclusionary, but it also prevented one household from easily becoming royal again. The consuls were accompanied by symbols of authority. The lictors, attendants carrying fasces, represented the power of punishment and command. These symbols reminded Romans that the Republic was not weak. It could command armies, punish enemies, and demand obedience. But now these symbols belonged to magistrates of the Republic, not to kings. Still, the consulship contained a tension that would never fully disappear. In times of peace, limits seemed wise. In times of crisis, limits could seem dangerous. What if Rome faced invasion? What if 2 consuls disagreed? What if speed mattered more than debate? To solve such problems, Rome would later use extraordinary offices such as the dictatorship, temporary emergency power granted under strict expectations. Even here, the Roman answer was not to abolish command, but to contain it. The Republic was therefore a machine built from suspicion. It trusted no single man completely. It divided power, rotated power, and surrounded power with public memory. This did not make Rome perfectly free, but it made Rome politically durable. Part 5. The Senate and the Aristocratic Republic. If the consuls gave the Republic movement, the Senate gave it memory. The Senate was not a modern parliament. It did not represent citizens in a democratic sense. It was a council of leading men, drawn from Rome's aristocratic families, whose authority came from age, ancestry, experience, wealth, and prestige. The Senate had existed under the kings, but under the Republic its influence grew. Because consuls changed every year, the Senate provided continuity. A consul might command for 12 months, but senatorial families remembered treaties, wars, religious obligations, debts, alliances, and rivalries across generations. In a society built on tradition, such memory was power. The Senate advised magistrates, influenced foreign policy, controlled public finances in practice, and shaped the long direction of the state. Its decrees were not always laws in the strictest sense, but its prestige carried enormous force. Roman politics often operated through custom as much as written rule. The Senate's authority was therefore not only legal, it was cultural. This is one reason the Roman Republic can be difficult to classify. It was not a monarchy. It was not a modern democracy. It was not a simple aristocracy either, because popular assemblies and elected magistracies mattered. It was a mixed system, shaped by different sources of authority. Magistrates held executive power, the Senate held prestige and continuity, and citizen assemblies held formal roles in election and law. Later Roman thinkers admired this mixture. They believed that Rome's strength came from balancing monarchy-like command, aristocratic wisdom, and popular consent. Whether this balance truly worked equally for all Romans is another question. For plebeians, clients, debtors, and the poor, the early republic could feel like freedom. For the nobles, more than freedom for everyone. But from the perspective of Roman political development, the Senate became the central guardian of republican identity. Its members were expected to think not only of personal advantage, but of the res publica, the public thing, the commonwealth, the shared political body of Rome. This phrase, res publica, gives us the word republic. It means that the state is not the private possession of a king, it is a public matter. Of course, ideals and reality are not the same. The Roman elite often used the language of public duty while defending family privilege. The Senate could be wise, but it could also be stubborn. It could protect tradition, but it could also resist necessary reform. This tension would grow across the centuries until the Republic itself began to break under the pressure of empire, wealth, military ambition, and social inequality. But in the early Republic, the Senate helped Rome survive the dangerous years after monarchy. It provided leadership without kingship. It allowed powerful families to compete inside a shared political framework. It turned aristocratic pride into service, rivalry, and public office. The Republic was not born pure. It was born practical. And the Senate was one of its most practical inventions. Part 6. Liberty, memory, and the hatred of kings. One of the deepest emotions of Roman republican culture was the hatred of kingship. This does not mean Romans hated authority. They respected authority intensely. They obeyed fathers, commanders, magistrates, priests, and ancestral customs. But they feared authority when it became personal and permanent. The Latin word rex, meaning king, became politically poisonous in Rome. A man could be wealthy, noble, victorious, admired, and powerful, but if people believed he wanted to be king, he became dangerous. This fear shaped Roman behavior at every level of public life. The story of Brutus shows this clearly. Lucius Junius Brutus was remembered as one of the founders of the Republic, a man who swore that Rome would never again have a king. Later tradition even told a severe story about him condemning his own sons when they were accused of plotting to restore the Tarquins. Whether the story is fully historical is less important than what it teaches. The Republic demanded loyalty stronger than blood. Public liberty stood above family. This idea may sound noble, but it was also harsh. Roman political morality often admired severity. A good citizen was expected to place the state above comfort, emotion, and private desire. The early Republic taught Romans that liberty was not softness. Liberty required discipline. It required sacrifice. It required suspicion toward anyone who rose too high. This suspicion gave the Republic energy, but also anxiety. Rome celebrated great men, yet feared them. It needed generals, but worried they might become tyrants. It admired military glory, but tried to bring victorious commanders back under civic control. It rewarded ambition, but punished ambition when it appeared to threaten the balance of the state. Here we can see the long shadow of episode 4 across all Roman history. The birth of the Republic is not only an early event, it becomes a pattern. When Julius Caesar later accepts extraordinary honors, his enemies will remember the kings. When Augustus later builds a new political order after civil war, he will avoid the title rex. He will present himself not as a king, but as princeps, the first citizen. Even the Roman Empire will have to speak the language of the Republic long after republican liberty has faded. This is why the early republic matters so much. It created the political vocabulary that later Romans could never escape. Words like liberty, consul, senate, people, tyranny, duty, honor, and public service became part of Rome's identity. Every later crisis would be argued through these memories. Yet we should also be careful. Roman liberty did not mean freedom for everyone in a modern sense. It protected the citizen body from kingship, but within that body there were deep inequalities. Women did not hold formal political office. Enslaved people had no liberty. Plebeians struggled for recognition. Wealthy families dominated public life. The Republic was a system of freedom and exclusion at the same time. That contradiction is not a weakness in the study of Rome. It is the study of Rome. The Republic was born as an answer to tyranny, but soon it had to answer another question. Liberty for whom? Part 7. Patricians, plebeians, and the limits of the new order. The early Republic gave Rome freedom from kings, but it did not give equal power to all citizens. The great division inside Roman society was between patricians and plebeians. The patricians were the old aristocratic families, the clans that claimed ancient status and special relationship with Rome's earliest institutions. They controlled much of political and religious life. They held the highest offices. They guarded tradition. They presented themselves as the natural leaders of the Republic. The plebeians were the broader citizen body, farmers, craftsmen, traders, laborers, soldiers, and families outside the patrician elite. They were not all poor, and the category was complex, but politically they were disadvantaged in the early Republic. They fought in Rome's armies, paid debts, worked the land, and carried the burdens of the city. Yet they did not initially share equally in its highest honors. This created a powerful contradiction. The Republic had been founded in the name of liberty, but many citizens experienced that liberty as incomplete. They were no longer subjects of a king, but they were still dependent on aristocratic power. They could be called to fight for Rome, but they could be excluded from ruling Rome. In the years after the monarchy, Rome faced external danger and internal tension at the same time. This is common in early states. War requires unity, but inequality produces resentment. The poor farmer who leaves his field to serve in the army may return home to debt. The citizen who risks his life in battle may ask why his voice matters so little in politics. The plebeian soldier may defend the Republic and then discover that the Republic is mostly controlled by patricians. These tensions would lead to the long conflict of the orders, one of the central stories of the early Republic. That conflict belongs especially to our next episode, but its roots begin here. The birth of the Republic solved the problem of kingship, but it exposed the problem of aristocracy. The Roman answer over time would be negotiation under pressure. Plebeians would organize, withdraw, demand representation, and force concessions from the patrician elite. New offices would emerge. Laws would be written down. Political rights would expand. The Republic would slowly become more complex because ordinary citizens refused to remain silent. This is one of the reasons Rome endured. It did not avoid conflict. It institutionalized conflict. It created offices, assemblies, customs, and compromises that allowed social tension to become part of the political system rather than simply destroying it. But in episode 4, we are still at the beginning. The Republic is young, the patricians are powerful, the plebeians are restless. The memory of the kings is fresh. Rome has escaped one form of domination, but another struggle is already forming beneath the surface. The city has no king now, but it must still learn what justice means. Part 8. Religion, Law, and the Sacred Shape of Politics. To modernize, politics and religion are often treated as separate worlds. In early Rome, they were woven together. The Republic was not only a set of offices and assemblies, it was also a sacred order. Roman magistrates did not act only as administrators. They operated inside a universe filled with signs, rituals, vows, sacrifices, and divine expectations. Before major public actions, Romans sought the favor of the gods. They watched the flight of birds, consulted auspices, honored sacred calendars, and believed that political success depended on religious correctness. This mattered during the transition from monarchy to republic. The king had held important religious functions. Removing the king therefore created a problem. How could Rome abolish royal political power without disrupting sacred tradition? The Roman solution was characteristically practical. Certain religious duties associated with kingship were separated from political command. The title rex survived in a religious form, but without the old royal power. This shows again that the Republic was not a simple destruction of the past. It was a careful rearrangement. Rome did not want chaos. It wanted continuity without tyranny. It wanted the gods honored, the rituals preserved, the ancestors respected, and the city protected, but without a ruling king. Law also became increasingly important. In the early Republic, much law was still customary, guarded by elite knowledge and religious tradition. This gave patricians great advantage, because those who understand the rules can control those who do not. For plebeians, one of the great future demands would be that laws be made visible and public. This desire would eventually contribute to the Law of the 12 Tables, a major moment in Roman legal history. The 12 Tables come after the immediate birth of the Republic, but their importance is already foreshadowed here. A republic cannot survive by memory alone. If law is hidden, power belongs to those who interpret it. If law is written, citizens can point to it, argue from it, and demand that judgment follow recognized standards. This movement toward public law would become one of Rome's greatest contributions to world history. Roman law did not emerge fully formed in 509 BCE. It developed slowly, through conflict, adaptation, conquest, and interpretation. But the republican instinct helped shape it. The state is a public thing. Law must be more than royal will, and authority must speak through recognized forms. Still, Roman law remained unequal in many ways. It protected status, family power, property, and hierarchy. It did not erase slavery. It did not make women political equals. It did not make the poor secure from debt. But it created a language of rights, duties, procedures, and citizenship that would grow with Rome's expansion. In the birth of the Republic, then, we see three forces joining together: politics, religion, and law. The Romans believed that a stable city required all three. Magistrates commanded, priests interpreted sacred order, laws and customs shaped public life, and behind them all stood the memory of what must never return: the proud king, ruling without restraint. Part 9. Closing. The Republic as Rome's second foundation. The birth of the Republic was Rome's second foundation. The first foundation gave Rome a place, a name, and a sacred story. The second gave Rome a political identity. After 509 BCE, Rome was no longer supposed to belong to a king. It belonged, at least in principle, to the res publica, the public thing. This idea did not make Rome equal, gentle, or peaceful. The early republic was aristocratic, militarized, hierarchical, and often harsh. But it created a powerful structure for collective ambition. It allowed elite families to compete without immediately destroying the state. It gave citizens a language of liberty. It made public office the path to honor. It turned suspicion of monarchy into a permanent political instinct. This republic would not remain small. At first, it struggled for survival among neighboring peoples in central Italy. Then it expanded across the Italian peninsula. Later, it crossed the sea, fought Carthage, entered the Greek world, absorbed kingdoms, and became the dominant power of the Mediterranean. But before Rome could rule others, it had to learn how to rule itself. That lesson began with fear. Fear of Tarquin, fear of tyranny, fear of one man standing above the laws. But it also began with invention. The Romans created consuls, strengthened the Senate, preserved religious continuity, and built a political culture around office, honor, competition, and restraint. Yet every solution created new problems. By removing the king, Rome empowered the aristocracy. By empowering the aristocracy, it provoked the plebeians. By celebrating liberty, it forced citizens to ask who truly possessed liberty. The Republic was born from a revolution against monarchy, but its next great drama would be a social struggle inside the citizen body itself. This is why episode 4 cannot end with perfect peace. The king is gone, but Rome is not settled. The Republic has begun, but it is not complete. The patricians hold power. The plebeians carry burdens. The army needs soldiers. The fields need farmers. The city needs laws that all citizens can know. Beneath the calm surface of Republican pride, pressure is building. In the next episode, we will enter that pressure. We will follow the struggle between patricians and plebeians, the fight for rights, the demand for written law, and the slow expansion of Roman citizenship. We will see that the Republic was not given to the people in a single moment. It was argued, resisted, negotiated, and won piece by piece. For now, imagine Rome at night, after the kings have fallen. The streets are quiet, the temples still stand, the Senate still gathers, the people still whisper about Tarquin, Lucretia, and Brutus. A new political world has opened, uncertain and severe. Rome has no emperor. Rome has no king. Rome has a republic.